My guest on this podcast is Salim Miah. Based on the Isle of Wight, he's been building his buy-to-let portfolio for about 17 years now. As a third-generation chef, he's faced enormous amounts of challenges in building that business and also pivoting during different stages of his life. So let's jump straight into the podcast.
I have JV opportunities come to me all the time, but I don't JV with anyone. I really follow what I've learned is the know, like and trust. So it took me 5 months to get my first rent-to-rent deal, which I found was absolutely strange because I was already a portfolio landlord. I was a restaurant owner. Now, we spent 9 months in hospital. She had to have 11 rounds of chemotherapy. She had to have a liver transplant. And it's during that time in 2017 that made me think what life is. What is life? What's all this money? What's all this material things? What's all this wealth? What's all these properties? It meant absolutely nothing when death stares in your face.
Salim, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I know you don't look very old now. You look like you're in your 20s, but actually you've been involved in property about 17, 18 years now, and mostly doing buy-to-let, but doing various different things right now. The background is really chefing, third generation chef, and living in the Isle of Wight, which is quite unusual. I wasn't even sure what property situations there. We're going to unpack all of that today. So first of all, tell me about one of the projects you're working on right now.
Okay, so we've actually got bids on 2 auctions today. So by the end of this podcast, we either won or lost them.
Yes.
So that's that. And I'm always on multiple deals. I'm just currently on a 5-bed HMO conversion, which is about 2-3 weeks from being completed.
Yeah.
And I've also won another property at auction, which is a 3-bed bungalow, which we're going to put planning in place and create a 5-bed, bungalow.
So tell us about the couple of auction bids you've got in today. First of all, let's talk about those.
Okay, so one is where buying it's below market value. It's a probate. The owner wants sold, so that's about 40% below market value. We've put a pre-auction offer there. So we're just waiting for that to get accepted.
And what will that be? If you're successful in that, what will you do with that one?
Okay, so just in terms of numbers, is where we've purchasing it for 75 to 80,000 should do it. Okay. By spending 30,000, the GDV on that should be on sold comps 170.
Right.
So that is a good deal. That's an all money out deal.
Okay.
So there are deals out there.
Yeah.
The second one is slightly bigger. It's a grade 2 listed building. It's 4,000 square feet.
Right.
So we're looking to convert that into a 3-bed townhouse and a 10/12 bed HMO. The numbers on that are very strong as well. It's an all money out deal.
Nice. And what's the typical price of a house in a 3-bed house semi, for example, in the Isle of Wight?
A 3-bed semi, it would depend on the location and the actual state of the property, but you're looking at probably near enough about the 200,000 mark.
Okay, that's interesting. And the HMOs, is there a demand for HMOs? Well, obviously there is because you're doing them, but is it something that there's a huge demand for, or? There is
a fair share of HMOs on the Isle of Wight. We do have a very large hospital, so there's a lot of doctors on placements there. We have 3 different prisons, so quite a lot of prisons for a small place.
Okay.
But it is quite a buoyant market, actually. If you don't go to the Isle of Wight, you won't know, but it is quite a buoyant market.
Yes. And the bungalow project, what's the bungalow project?
Okay, the bungalow project we bought below market value. So the value add there would be, it's got 100% flat roof, so the property wasn't mortgageable. So once again, it was a probate property. The guy had died and the estate are selling it. We also had a pre-auction offer bid accepted there. So I won that for £200,000.
Okay.
By adding probably a pitch roof, so we would need to have planning in place. We've had a change of use, and by adding planning there, by spending about 90,000, that should take the GDV to 375.
Right, nice. So I know you've been sourcing for a little while as well in terms of finding properties. But is that your preferred auction method, auction, or do you use different strategies to find the properties?
Okay, so there are deals to be done at auction, but not necessarily there are good deals at auctions, so it all depends on what you're buying for, the value add, and what are your exits. So there are some good deals that we have had at auctions.
Yes.
But my other sourcing method is, I'm constantly online and I have different software that look for deals, and just having that network to look
Yes.
for deals for me as well. So there's various types of sourcing methods I use.
And networking is something we were talking about before we started filming, is and something I resonated with similar with myself when I started. I was kind of trying to break into this new world of property, which you'd already had some experience when you started, but trying to get into this world of networking and understanding that actually connections can help. What was it that gravitated you towards networking and property networking events?
Okay, so when I first started my property journey, I had many others help me, and I was attending networking events in Southampton, which is the nearest one, the PIN, the PPNs, and I also attend PPN Stratford in London. Um, but like various people have helped me on my journey, and by networking, you get to leverage, the network. There's a lot of experience in the room. So a lot of people have assisted me, when I first started, and it's now a case of acquiring and absorbing that knowledge and now giving back. So all of my mentors have stated in the past, Salim, is there a networking event on the Isle of Wight? I said, no. They said, well, you should open one. I was quite nervous, and I thought, I don't think I can do that now. I'm not a public speaker, so I'm not ready. They said, you either do or someone else will. There is no time to get ready. The time is now. So I kind of gained up the courage to, create Isle of Wight's first ever property networking event.
Yes.
And it was all a case of just giving back, helping others, sharing the knowledge, having some great speakers come on board, covering different property, topics. So it's all about giving back and helping others. And by helping others, I've seen that you do get rewarded.
Yes. And I think this for me was a huge eye opener when I first started attending networking events. I just found that people were really helpful and giving you advice openly. And I'm thinking, my background was in IT, and we probably, in the circles I was, people weren't that open about kind of helping you, and because they'd see you as a competitor potentially. But in property, it seems to be a different mindset. People are very, very open, helping each other. And as you said, you've seen that and then started trying to help others as well.
Yeah. So what I've seen is just you really need to network, and you need to sort of leverage other people's experience and time. And by networking, you can do that. Sometimes it can turn into into mini masterminds, is where you've got a certain speaker there, and you've acquired that knowledge, which you basically did not know of. There's going to be sort of lots and lots of golden nuggets there as well. So leverage is very powerful, and by networking, you can do that. And just like example, most of my power team I'm actually met through like networking.
Yes.
Whether it be solicitors, accountants, I've built a team just by networking. So it's essential to network.
Yes, and the have this phrase that the more hands you shake, the more money you make. It's really about connecting with people, having conversations, getting to know them, and it's not often the conversation just in the room on the day. It's those follow-ups, the meetings that you might have. Those relationships sometimes can be forged from there.
Yes. So our phrase we use is your network is your network.
Yes,
And indeed, that can't be any more truer. And you're helping solve other people's problems. Now, when I said earlier that you can be rewarded, is by the more problems there are, then the more money there is to be made. There's lots of people that come into the networking events that wish to go into property, that don't have the time or knowledge, but whereas they may have the funds. So 3 things I need to do a property deal is the knowledge, the time, and the funds. Not everyone has those 3.
yes. So you can help facilitate that. We'll talk more about that in a short while in terms of unpacking what that means. When you first got involved in property, your property wasn't the core thing, but 17, 18 years ago when you started buying, you're running restaurants, the first Bengali restaurants on the Isle of Wight at the time.
Yes.
I said you're a 3rd generation chef. What made you start thinking about, I should start buying some property?
Okay, so it was never my intention to become a full-time property investor or a landlord. So it was my intention. I loved cooking, and I had a passion for cooking, and I've served customers from all over the world. So my passion was very much in running the business. It's just when I was acquiring, like a pot of cash, and I thought, I'll invest in property. It was purely as an intention of like a pension, as a side income, but my main priority was my restaurant salary.
Yes.
And I started to buy the old method of saving up 25%, buy a property, wait a little bit, save up some more money. That was just the intention.
So it was you were parking savings into property and growing the buy-to-let portfolio now, which is the method many people did at the time.
Yes, so I was following the odd way of investing. If I just wish what I knew now I knew back then, but as they say, but it's not too late.
You've heard the phrase, your network is your net worth, and you'll also hear it in this particular podcast as well. That's because people in property recognize the importance of being connected with other people. Property is a people business, and that's the reason I've been running a networking event for over a decade now. Each and every month we bring like-minded people together, an opportunity for you to come along and meet some of those people and also learn from other people on the stage, learn from myself as well. So make sure you book onto the next meeting. We're on the third Tuesday of every month in Birmingham. Now let's get back to the podcast.
So I was buying the old conventional way. It still worked, because you've got to park your money up somewhere. So I think the best investment is in bricks and mortar.
So Salim, I know you faced huge number of challenges. I know some of your story and your background in terms of what's got you to where you are. And sometimes you can be burdened with enormous amount of things. And I know you've had quite a challenging journey there as well.
I've had lots of hurdles and challenges in my life, done too many to list. But look, I think like everything boils down to the mindset. It's how you can keep yourself together. I was childless for like 11 years. That's one of the hardest things to go through. I hope no one goes through that. So you can tell during that time it eats away at you. So that wasn't the sort of easiest. And then look, in my young 20s, I always wanted to have my own restaurant. We went from a humble takeaway to a restaurant. So that wasn't easy as well. Back in 2007, we borrowed £320,000.
Right.
Back then, our business bank was NatWest. All of my uncles were against it, thought it was suicide. I didn't have any outside catering. All the other sort of restaurant in that area were thinking, wow, that's crazy for that part of the high street. This young chap in his 20s, they're going to be opening a restaurant, and that's a significant amount of funds. But do you think that stopped me? Do you think I had fear? No. The most important thing that for others to believe in you, you have to believe in yourself.
Yes.
I didn't have any sort of sleepless nights. I didn't know, because I knew I could make it work. We had a strong following, and there's good risk and there's bad risks. I had no fear, and that's the way my father molded me to have no fear. And we actually broke that. Now, back then, we needed to break even at £6,000. We were doing in excess of £14,000.
Okay.
So
that was also when the credit crunch happened as well.
Yes.
But you still managed to.
But we still managed. So that's a big burden for someone to take. But look, life, I think I am a risk taker, and life is there for risks to be taken. So that's a huge challenge as well.
This is something that you took on as a risk. You thought, right, I'm going to do this because I believe myself I can make this work, and you had the belief and the confidence. Many people lack the belief, and there's other things that are done to us where we don't have a choice.
Yes, so there are dreams there to be achieved, and we've done that with the restaurant. But look, some things can come and can really hit you, and it can hit you hard. 11 years after trying for a baby, and we were successful on the 4 or 5 year attempt, in sort of nearly £30,000 later, 12 months after our daughter was born, she got diagnosed with liver cancer. Now, I hope no one goes through that, and no words can describe how the feeling went. My wife had a nervous breakdown, and I really basically couldn't contain myself together. It was so hard. I hope no one goes through that. Now, we spent 9 months in hospital. She had to have 11 rounds of chemotherapy. She had to have a liver transplant. And it's during that time in 2017 that made me think what life is. What is life? What's all this money? What's all this material things? What's all this wealth? What's all these properties? It meant absolutely nothing when death stares in your face. Yeah. So it's during that time, I had a word with my wife, and I said, one thing's for sure, I no longer want to be in the restaurant industry, but what am I going to do? So it was her that said, well, why don't you get into property?
Yes.
So I said, well, what am I going to do? She said, well, look, what things are you good at? Just learn more, go and Google. And it's then when I went and I found out more on the internet. Wow, I didn't know this before. I took a few online training, and one thing led to from another to another.
And it's sometimes the biggest challenges in our life help us realize and puts context in that actually, am I pursuing the right things? Is it all about just building this business? Is it about the quality of life, the challenges and struggles you've been through?
I think, look, life has turning points, and that was definitely a turning point in my life. I'm a very tough-minded person, and that nearly broke me. But I think actually what my parents said was that is actually a blessing in disguise, because that was a turning point in my life, and that actually changed the way I looked at life.
Yes.
And that's what eventually got me into property, because otherwise, who knows, I wouldn't have been a full-time property investor now. Because my love and passion was in cooking, when in fact now I do cook time to time now, but it's actually property, because I love what I do, and I think if you enjoy what you do, you're going to be good at what you do.
And we hope nobody ever goes through those kind of challenges in life, having to struggle those. But life can sometimes throw us enormous amounts of the challenges, and I know for a long time one of the releases or the vices was have nice things, buy nice things, nice cars, nice watches and things like this. And they could be a mask for the challenges you really have to deal with.
Yes, so it's during that time, I was very much in, like busy chefing in the restaurant. I really, could have given my family time. And I thought, my wife said to me at one point back in 2011, that was 4 or 5 years before our daughter was born. Look, just kind of step back a little bit, treat yourself, and then just buy, something, take a break from property. So we had our first holiday in Bangladesh, and my boyhood dream was to have like a brand new Mercedes, sorry, which I eventually done. That was a dream come true. And it was also to buy a Rolex, which I've still got to this day.
Okay.
I used to have a vision board when I was younger. Oh, I'm going to buy a brand new Mercedes and a Rolex, and those dreams came true. It was purely just by hard work. It's not been easy. I mean, being your own boss in a restaurant is not easy. The time, the commitment, and the dedication needed.
It's a very isolating environment as well, because you have a very small circle of people you're with, and you're doing the same thing day in, day out. It's hard graft, and you've been persevering at that and building that. So you're making the money. You think, I could park it in a bit of property, but there's all challenges going on in personal life as well with your daughter. You have an interesting story about buying that first Rolex. You were even telling me, and it shows the mindset of someone that's an entrepreneur, and they're thinking. Just share that story with us.
Yeah. So a funny story is I looked at a Rolex date which was 22 karat gold. They were retailing for about 7,700 in Bond Street in London. I had advice from someone saying that, look, if you take cash and just offer them in the region of something over 5,000, they actually might accept it. Because if you point WAD in their face, cash, they might accept it. So funny story is I went there and I instantly built up the rapport with the guy. And we got talking, and he was actually, he used to go on holidays to the Isle of Wight.
Right.
So we instantly built up a connection there. So my tactics were to build up the rapport, build up, and then just go in for the kill.
Yes.
So I thought, look, I really like this watch. I'm going to pay in cash. It's not going to be a bank transfer or debit card. Let's do a deal. And to cut a long story short, I was going back and forth. I said, look, I'm going to leave now, or I'll park my money somewhere else. I've got £5,000. And in the end, it took me an hour going back and forth. And the guy gave in and said, all right, then, okay, I will box out for you at 5,300.
Yeah. Nice. That's probably what, good 20-25% discount on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And those principles of really building rapport, getting people to know you, like you, there's a trust element, there's a comfortable conversation going on, a little bit of haggling. Those skills are not that dissimilar for what you're applying with an estate agent or someone you're speaking to directly as a homeowner that may be looking to sell.
Yes. So I'm a big fan of quotes, and one of the metrics I use in life is property is a people's business. People invest in people first, and bricks and mortar second. So what I mean by that is, people, the know, like, trust method. People got to know you. If they know you, they get to like you. If they like you, they trust you. Yeah. So everything falls into place. Your values and your and also your visions have to be aligned. You've got to share the same values. So it's very much a people's business. That's whether that's working with estate agents, vendors, or or really anyone. So you've got to build up the rapport, and you've got to demonstrate how working with you can bring value, how you can help them, they can help you.
Yes. And when you're working with agents, what do you find is it that ultimately that enables you to get a deal done with them? Do you take the approach of these are the numbers, this is what works, and then take that approach, or do you take the approach of understanding the agent and then seeing how you could maybe strike a deal?
So the way I look at it is, so basically Isle of Wight's quite a small place, so I'm based local, so the agents know me anyway. And actually, a funny story is most of them actually used to eat at our restaurant.
Okay.
So I've got a head start there. So the fundamental thing is, look, we're really after the property. So we're like property investors. We're after the property. I tell them what kind of property that I'm after. This is my budget in these certain places. So they just come back to me on that.
Yes.
But it's also really important to be professional about it, to build up the rapport, demonstrate that if you are a cash buyer, then you've got to honor, you're going to say what say what you do, kind of thing, that you're able to move fast. And sometimes you can get a head start. So if you tell the agents and be precise on exactly what you're looking for, you can build up the rapport. They know that they can come to Salim and they can get a cash buy. If I need a 28-day completion, a 56-day, I tell them exactly how it is.
Yes.
So there's no mismatch there.
And I think the really important part of that for me is that not only are you giving the agent the criteria of, here, look, this is what I'm looking for, but they've got to know you and they know that you will deliver on what you're saying. If you're saying, look, this is what we're going to do, this is how we can do it. And that gives them confidence that if they come to you, you're going to deliver on that.
As I've said, is working with someone, you've got to bring value to them, and it's just vice versa. I've had off-market deals come to me, before, purely by just having a relationship with the agents first. And it, depending on the deal, how strong the deal is, I can even say to them, look, I'm even happy to pay the seller's fee. Just to get the deal over the line.
Yes.
Or I'm happy to pay these kind of fees on top as well, if the deal is strong and if the deal allows it.
Yeah.
So that's also can build up an extra rapport with the agent.
Yeah,
so
as long as the numbers work. Ultimately, the numbers need to work for you, and then you can structure in different ways.
It is.
So, although you've done well in your career in terms of what you've been doing before you've kind of looked at property full time, I'm assuming you haven't got bags and bags of cash, not literal cash as well, that the days that you could buy Rolexes in cash with. So that isn't the case. So how do you keep funding deals like this?
Okay, so my mentors used to say back in the day is, Salim, leverage. 3 things are needed to do a property deal is someone's got to bring the time, someone's got to bring the knowledge, someone has to bring the funds. Not everyone, is quite rare to find all 3. Not everyone has all 3. Now, the way I work is how I raise funds is I've probably raised in excess of $500,000 in like private investors funds. So it's all about problem solving. Now, that started by networking, by helping others, is where you've got someone that doesn't have the knowledge, doesn't have the time, but they want to grow a property portfolio. Now, I've got access to deals all the time. I'm on basically multiple deals, and I have a pipeline, and I always have.
Yes.
I'm very active, and I'm quite rampant as well. So it's funds are easy to raise. One of my mentors also said to me was, Salim, find the deal, the money will follow.
Yeah.
And I've always followed that process. If there's a deal to be done, the funds can be raised. The easiest part is the hardest, and the hardest part is the easiest. There is money out there. There are people sat in a lot of money, but they don't know where to invest it. They don't have the time, and that they don't have the knowledge. But what I've leveraged is they've been able to leverage my time and experience, and by networking, and it's not an overnight fix. It can take years to build up rapport. People, once again, see the values and they share the vision. And if I can demonstrate I can make them money, then there's certainly money is on tap. There's an endless stream of money. So to raise, money, it really depends on the deal.
Yes. So it comes back to what we were saying earlier about the numbers. As long as the numbers stack, what we mean by that, there's a good, healthy profit and there's a clear exit. You can see how you're going to make money, how you're going to come out of that deal. Your job really is finding it, de-risking it as much as possible, as kind of finder sources. That's what we're doing. And then it's a case of looking at, okay, how we're going to work with somebody on it in terms of them funding it. So what is it? What the few things that you look for when you are thinking about who's going to work with you as an investor funder?
I have JV opportunities come to me all the time, but I don't JV with anyone. I really follow what I've learned is the know, like, and trust. So property is no different. When you're JVing or when you're working with investors, it's very much just like a personal relationship. It's where you've got to know, like, and trust. Your values and visions have to be aligned. I wouldn't work with anyone, and I'm sure anyone wouldn't work. So those are the principles that I follow.
With the investors, a question that I get asked quite a lot when people are asking me for advice, say, do I go and find the deal first? Or do I go and find the investors first who can fund the deal and work with me? Which one do you think is the right one for you?
That's a common asked question. It's like a catch-22 or the chicken and the egg kind of, like scenario. So it's a bit of both. Look, if you have the deal, but you don't have the investor, so who are you going to source your deal to? Or who are you going to be, like doing the JV with, or, getting the loan from?
Yeah.
So at the same time, on the opposite side is, if you have the investors and you have no deals, and investors are chasing you up and saying, Salim,
Yes.
look, you've got the funds, I'm going to park it somewhere else. Where's the deals? So a bit of both, but fundamentally, you need to be finding deals in order to raise capital to do more property deals. You need to be finding and stacking deals. Once you get those deals, then it could be funder number one, it could be funder number two. So I think it's a bit of both, but you really need to kind of demonstrate to be finding deals first.
Yes. And when you started doing property kind of more full time a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, this is a case of this is now what I want to do, and the transitioned out of the day job, as it were, then your first strategy was service accommodation. It was rent to service accommodation. What was the reason for choosing that strategy, and kind of what was the plan with that?
Okay, so while I was still in the restaurant, industry, I was still being trained and mentored. I wasn't an SA mastermind. So obviously after the challenges I've had, and I handed in my notice in 2018, so I said to my father, look, it might take me 2 years, it might take me 4 years, but I want to move into property full time. So I was being mentored, and I took all the information I had, and I had some pot of cash, but I couldn't afford to park it up and do a BRR, wait 6 months. No, I needed immediate cash flow. I needed to exit the restaurant industry. And at that time, the best strategy was rent to rent SA, rent to rent service accommodation. I needed immediate cash flow. It took me 5 months to get my first rent to rent deal,
Right.
which I found was absolutely strange, because I was already a portfolio landlord. I was a restaurant owner, so I already had the credit.
You own property, you own investment property,
Yeah.
commercial property that you had as well, and you were struggling to convince someone to give you a property as a
Bear in mind, is on the mainland is quite different. I was based on the Isle of Wight.
Yeah.
A little bit backward.
Yeah.
So I was actually the first rent-to-renter.
Okay.
Estate agents or vendors have never ever heard of that before.
Yes.
They thought it was a strategy from outer space. So it took me 5 months, and my vendor and my mentor said back then, Salim, look, keep on knocking, the doors will open. I was saying, what's going on? I've pitched it the correct way. I've showed them what I could, and I've demonstrated this. But eventually, to cut a long story short, after much hardship, 5 months later, I got my first rent deal through like a letting agent.
Yes.
And it started to snowball from there.
Yes. And then you started doing a few of those and that gave you the cash flow then to, okay, I can now transition out the job.
So when I went onto my third rent to rent unit, I no longer needed to fund it. Then my first ever JV was actually through one of my mentors. We were on a Zoom call, and he said, Salim, you're on your third SA unit. And he knew that I, obviously wanted to leave the restaurant industry. What's stopping you from getting like unit number 4 and 5? So he looked into the numbers, and he said, Salim, that's some really great numbers, some cash flow. We were doing about 800 to 1,000
Okay,
month cash flow per
profit,
unit, profit net cash flow. So I said, well, it's a pot of cash. I've got to save up for a pot of cash to get the fourth unit. He said, well, the numbers are strong. How about this? How many more SA units do you need? I said, well, I need quite a few, and that would, that would be a nice cushion for me to leave, like the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
He said, well, how about this? I've got £80,000. I can fund for another 8 units if it costs 10,000 a unit. I'll put in the money. You're on the ground. You run the show. You do all the legwork, and we have a 50-50 share. And that was the first ever JV that got pitched to me.
Yes.
And it just started from there. And I just started to snowball to 8 units, all within a matter of months.
So some of it was the confidence, someone saying to you, look, you've already been doing this now. You can't understand the model. Time to scale up.
Yeah.
And to do more.
That
the other part was probably the funds as well, knowing actually I've got some money there to do
that. Was the turning point. What I found in my life is I've never needed to pitch for investment. Going back to the know, like, and trust, and my mentors became my JV partners because they knew me, they saw the value, they've trained me, and they thought, so one of the best investments you can make is in yourself. And that was a turning point in my life when I thought, wow, I didn't pitch it, and I've got 80,000 on tap here. So the money wasn't the issue. The easiest part was the hardest. The hardest part was the easiest. Finding the deals, back then it was SA. To find parking in a perfect location would it work for SA? The funding wasn't the issue, and that kind of changed things life around, and that was a game changer.
So the model, if somebody's not familiar with what we're talking about here, the model for you is you were renting the property from a landlord or from the letting agent. You were then operating it short stay for people that are tourists coming to the Isle of Wight there, and so that would generate for you about £800 or maybe £1,000 profit over and above what you are after your costs, what you're paying the landlord. So you mentioned you needed some money to grow this. Sometimes people assume rent to rent, you just get going. But what was the kind of £10,000 per unit? How would you break down what needed to happen for each property?
Okay, so when you're doing rent to rent, obviously there's going to be cost involved. I always see basic people mention on social media, it costs a few rand there and there. Well, not really, because going back to the root of the property is going to need a refurb. Bear in mind that the properties that do get offered to you on a rent-to-rent basis are going to be tied. Are going to be tied landlords. The property might not be in the best of conditions, so that requires work. Everything isn't just on furnishings and the deposit and the rent. It could be on refurbing the property. There's a bit of mold, bit of damp. It needs a new shower screen, and like the kitchen might need a few cupboards. So some of the cost is actually on the refurb.
Yeah, and improving the property.
Yeah. To improve the standard, it might need a carpet clean. So most of the money is spent there. The furnishings are just a remainder of that.
And that's an interesting approach, because sometimes when you're looking at a property like that, because it's a bit tired, your rent is going to be probably lower as well in terms of what you're paying. You're improving the property, and then you're operating in this way that gives you a nice, healthy profit margin. And I like that strategy. When we first started rent to rent, I think 12, 13 years ago at that time, that was the model that I liked as well. I'll invest in the property to improve it, even new kitchen, new bathroom. Some people thought it was crazy spending that kind of money on a house we don't own. But actually that cash flow is really high. Like £1,000, £1,500 was like average on some of the houses we were doing at that time. So it made sense to me in the long run. But sometimes other people see, why are you spending money on somebody else's property? I guess the other alternative is you take on a property that's really nice, brand spanking new, looks fantastic, but you'd be paying a very high rent for that. So your profit margin starts to shrink there as well.
I think everything in life is there needs to be a balance. There has to be a balance. I mean, my first SA unit, I spent in excess of £13,000.
Okay.
People thought probably I was crazy back in 2020 for doing that. But what you have to sometimes look at is your long-term plan and not your short-term plan. If you can refurb it to a high standard and use quality products and you can do it well, then that's going to be a money earner for you to years to come.
Yeah.
And my first ever rent-to-rent SA unit, I still have it to this today.
Yeah.
And it's always booked out, purely because you kind of plant the seed and you let that grow.
Yes. And even though you spent £13,000, but a year or so, you would have made that money back.
Yeah.
And the subsequent years, you're making that £1,000 profit at least, or sold thereabouts each month anyway. My
first ever SA unit, we actually launched when lockdown.
Okay.
And it could have been the worst possible start.
People not being able to get around.
My mentor said back then we had to pivot towards the NHS.
Yeah.
So my rent back then was 650 to £700, I believe.
Yeah.
So we turned to the NHS and we had a 3-month deal for £1,500 a month.
Well,
So we were cash flowing about after bills and the rent, maybe up £500 during lockdown. Wasn't bad.
I think the SA business for us, our SA business, when lockdown happened, then it was like a bit of a panic moment for us at that time. Oh my God, what do we do at that time? And that we found as well, actually, the NHS was a huge benefit for us at that time, where the doctors, nurses were the ones that were taking the accommodation from us.
I think once again is being part of a network and being part of the, being part of a mastermind. If you leverage information and knowledge, others can help you. And it was a case of, we always have to change and adapt, because if you don't, times are always changing and evolving. Yeah. If you don't move with the times, then change and adapt, then you will be, you will be left behind, which could become risky.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Many people that have been in property for a long time keep doing the same thing, and they wonder why it stopped working, because the market's constantly changing, evolving, and you have to adapt with it as well. So the strategies that worked 5 years ago or 10 years ago aren't the same that people are using today. So that kind of brings me on to, you started with the rent to service accommodation, you started building that to 8 units. Why not scale that to 80 units?
Okay, so rent to rent service accommodation for me, rent to rent was, it was only a 5-year plan. That was a side stepping stone as a side income stream, because I had my portfolio. I also had my restaurant salary. So I needed that sort of multiple stream of income. And the plan was a 5-year plan to gain cash flow, and that would able for me to like leave the restaurant industry.
Yes.
But also the plan was, within those 5 years, was to grow my network, to leverage my network, and to work with other investors.
Yes.
And in year 3, I got to where I wanted.
Okay.
I was doing bigger deals like commercial to resi conversions, HMOs. I was doing 1 to 2 bed conversions. Some of them I was sourcing, like back in the day, when I was doing rent to rents. But then I saw that the best deals I can keep for myself.
Yes.
So I found the deals. I just took it to my investors, who I had built up, I had built up a little database, and I basically leveraged that to grow my own portfolio.
Yes. I like the idea of rent to rent being a stepping stone strategy. And I say that to, many of our students and mentees as well. Look, if you're doing rent to rent, think about it as a way that's going to help you get onto the next thing. And often it's like, the day job. Like one of our mentees just this week emailed me and said, look, they're moving to Dubai because they've got the cash flow built up now from the rent to service accommodation business. And now they want to go and do some stuff in Dubai and kind of build a business out there. But this has freed them up in the sense that now it can operate, it can produce a really good income for them while they kind of go on to the next thing. And as you said, for you, that was finding other projects and bigger projects.
I think knowing a market is key and is vital. The Isle of Wight is different to other areas. Some rent to rents are working really great for people. Some rent to rents not so. Bear in mind is, by knowing the local area and the market, Isle of Wight is going to be mainly leisure. Now, over the years, obviously the cost of utilities have gone up, gas, electric, water, rents have gone up, costs have gone up, the housekeeping costs have gone up, Airbnb, Booking.com are charging 18% or more now. So, and less and less people are traveling. That means basically it's just the nightly rate goes and that has a factor on the occupancy. There isn't enough builders or contractors now on the Isle of Wight. The Isle of Wight tend to have their own, subbies there. So I kind of, in year 3, I kind of saw the pattern, and I kind of quit the game while I was ahead. Bear in mind, I was using as a 5-year plan. In year 3, I started to now thinking of, I can slowly hand the units back. I've gone from 8 down to 2 because I didn't want to oversaturate. I knew my market, because oversaturating would have meant, basically dipping your hand in your pocket for rents. So I kind of read the game well, use that as a side, like stepping stone. I had no time to waste. It was a case of going there, building the foundations, meeting people, investors, solving problems. How can I make you money? And basically, in return, that's made me money.
Yes.
In order to grow my portfolio.
So tell us about the current HMO you're doing at the moment.
So the current HMO was bought off market by an agent of mine. So we bought that for 147. It's a 3-bed block property which we're converting into a 5-bed HMO. So that's going to have some funds left in there. That was also a JV with someone who I met at a property networking event. They wanted to grow their portfolio.
Yes.
They said, Salim, I've got a 5-year plan. I want to grow my portfolio. I don't have the time. He's a pharmacist.
Yes.
So I said, okay, that's fine. You can leverage that onto me. I can grow it for you. And property can be a lonely journey. And like people sometimes don't have the time and knowledge. This is where you can leverage others and you can actually lift yourselves and grow together. So that's really fundamental.
And the type of accommodation that you create, tell me about what that will look like and who is it you typically would target as a potential tenant?
So we have a mixed bag, but the target that would be going for is sort of like the working professionals, doctors and nurses, because we're less than half a mile away from the hospital.
Right.
We have a large number of doctors on placements.
Yes.
So these would be our clients.
So in terms of the extent of the renovation, do you do a small renovation kind of medium, or do you do like huge renovations?
This one needed like a brick to brick, and really we've overrun on this project and we've gone over budget actually. So we are 2-3 weeks from actually finishing.
Okay.
So by the time it's probably nearly done now.
Yes.
So this one needed a significant outlay, but what we're thinking is my JV partner is actually future proofing. It's for the long term.
Yes.
If we do it well at the start, then obviously in the future we won't really need to look at it much more.
That's really a smart approach, and we like to do that as well, where we spend probably more money up front, knowing that actually you're creating a solid product, a solid asset that's going to run well many years to come, and it will still be it'll be competitive and profitable in the future as well.
Yes, indeed.
Salim, this has been a fascinating conversation. I've enjoyed learning more about you and your background and what's inspired you and some of the challenges you faced. If somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'm very active on social media, but I think the best would be my email.
And we'll list that up on the description as well, and also we'll put it on the screen as well.
Yes.
Salim, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.